Monday has rolled around again, and with it comes that familiar mix of relief and unease surrounding Celtic right now. The result of the weekend did its job on paper, another victory added to the tally, another step taken in what still feels like a tense and unpredictable title race. But anyone who watched the match closely knows that the scoreline only tells part of the story. There is a growing feeling among supporters that something just is not clicking, that the performances are lacking the kind of authority and identity that you would expect at this stage of the season. Even with 3 points secured, the mood is far from fully optimistic, especially when you look at how the other contenders are performing and continuing to keep the pressure firmly on. The reality is that the table remains incredibly tight, and while Celtic are still very much in the fight, the margins are becoming thinner with each passing week. Results elsewhere did not do any favors, and the gap in goal difference has quietly turned into a significant concern. It is the kind of detail that you hope will not matter in the end, but at the same time, it lingers in the background, adding another layer of tension to every match. When teams around you are not only winning but doing so emphatically, it naturally amplifies any doubts about your own performances, especially when those wins are not coming with the same level of dominance. What makes it more frustrating is that the setting at the weekend seemed perfect for a statement performance. Back at home, in front of a passionate crowd, under good conditions, and facing opposition that on paper should have been there for the taking. The early goal should have been the platform to build something more convincing, the kind of display that settles nerves and sends a message. Instead, the game drifted into a pattern that has become all too familiar, where control never fully translates into comfort, and where the outcome always feels just a little bit in doubt for longer than it should. That underlying tension is starting to show, not just in the stands, but in the way the team approaches matches. There were moments, particularly in the second half, where the atmosphere shifted, where impatience began to creep in, and where every misplaced pass or missed opportunity seemed to carry extra weight. It is not that the support is turning, but rather that expectations remain high and the gap between expectation and reality is becoming more noticeable. When you wait all week for a performance that excites and inspires, and instead you are left grinding through another narrow win, it naturally leads to frustration. Looking at the broader picture, the numbers themselves raise questions. Goals have not been flowing in the way you would expect from a side chasing a title, and defensive solidity has not been consistent either. Keeping a clean sheet should have felt like a turning point, but instead it almost felt like a rare occurrence rather than the standard. It is a strange situation where the results are largely positive, yet the underlying performances do not fully convince. That contrast is what fuels the ongoing debate among supporters about where this team really stands and whether it has enough to go all the way. Part of that uncertainty comes down to the sense that there is no clear identity on the pitch. It is difficult to point to a defined style of play or a consistent approach that the team relies on. Instead, it often feels like the objective is simply to find a way to win, regardless of how it looks. While that mentality can carry you through difficult periods, it also leaves little room for confidence when the margins become even tighter. Without a clear identity, every match becomes its own challenge, and there is less of a foundation to fall back on when things are not going smoothly. There are understandable reasons for that situation, especially given the circumstances in the dugout. When the focus is on short-term results, the priority naturally shifts away from building something long-lasting. It becomes about immediate outcomes rather than long-term development, about securing points rather than refining a style. That approach can be effective in stabilizing a season, but it also comes with limitations, particularly when facing stronger opposition or when trying to maintain consistency over a longer run of games. Even so, it would be unfair to ignore the positives that have come from this period. The team has managed to stay in contention despite clear imperfections, and that in itself speaks to a certain level of resilience. Grinding out results when not at your best is often what defines a title challenge, and there is still time for performances to improve. The key question is whether that improvement will come quickly enough and whether the players can raise their level when it matters most. As the fixtures ahead begin to look more demanding, the margin for error continues to shrink. Each game carries more weight. Each performance is scrutinized more closely, and the pressure builds with every passing week. There is a sense that the current level will not be enough against stronger sides, that something extra will be required to navigate the challenges that lie ahead. Whether that comes from tactical adjustments, individual brilliance, or a shift in mentality remains to be seen, but it is clear that the team cannot rely solely on scraping through. For now, the focus remains on taking it one game at a time, on continuing to collect wins, and staying within touching distance at the top. It may not be the most convincing path, and it may not inspire complete confidence, but it keeps the door open. In a title race where every point matters, that is ultimately what counts, even if the journey there feels far more complicated than it perhaps should be. There is also a growing conversation around the individuals within the squad, because when performances lack cohesion, attention naturally shifts to the players themselves and how they are contributing to the overall picture. Some figures continue to stand out, not just for what they produce on the pitch, but for the presence they bring within the dressing room. Experience is often spoken about at times like this, and it could yet prove to be one of the defining factors as the season edges closer to its conclusion. When pressure builds and margins tighten, those who have been through similar situations before are expected to step forward and guide the rest. One of the more intriguing elements to emerge recently has been the influence of players who perhaps are still finding their rhythm, but have already shown flashes of real quality. You can see moments where composure, technique, and decision-making lift the level of the team, even if only briefly. Those moments become crucial in matches that are otherwise lacking fluidity, and they offer a glimpse of what this side could look like if everything started to click at the same time. The challenge now is turning those isolated flashes into something more consistent, something the team can rely on rather than hope for. Leadership, both vocal and through performance, is another aspect that cannot be ignored. In tight title races, it is often the teams with the strongest internal structure that find a way through difficult spells. There is no shortage of players who understand what it takes to win, but translating that knowledge into performances week after week is a different challenge altogether. It is not just about big moments, but also about maintaining standards in the quieter parts of matches, keeping concentration levels high, and managing the tempo when things threaten to slip. At the same time, there are ongoing debates about selection choices and whether certain players should be starting matches given their current form or fitness levels. It is a delicate balance between trusting experienced figures and recognizing when changes are needed to inject energy into the side. When a player is not fully fit, even if they bring leadership and quality, it can disrupt the overall rhythm of the team. That is where decisions become critical, especially in a period where every small advantage can make a difference. Midfield, in particular, feels like an area where adjustments could have a significant impact. It is the engine room, the place where control is established and where transitions are either built or broken down. When that area lacks sharpness or intensity, the effects are felt throughout the entire team. There have been glimpses of combinations that could offer more creativity and movement, players capable of carrying the ball forward, linking play, and adding a different dimension to attacks. Finding the right balance there could be key to unlocking more convincing performances. There is also the question of consistency in the attacking areas, where the output has not quite matched expectations. Goals have come, but not with the regularity or fluency that would ease concerns. At times, the build-up play looks promising, but the final action is missing, whether it is the final pass, the timing of a run, or the composure in front of goal. These are fine margins, but they are the margins that often decide matches, particularly when facing teams that are well-organized and difficult to break down. As the schedule becomes more demanding, the psychological side of the game will play an increasingly important role. Confidence can be fragile in situations like this, especially when performances are being questioned despite positive results. The ability to block out external noise, to stay focused on the immediate task, and to trust in the process becomes essential. At the same time, the support from the stands can act as both a driving force and a source of pressure, depending on how the game unfolds. There is a sense that the team is walking a fine line, managing to stay upright, but never quite finding full balance. That can change quickly in football, sometimes with just one dominant performance that shifts the narrative and restores belief. The opportunity for that kind of turning point still exists, and it could arrive at any moment if the pieces begin to fall into place. Until then, it remains a case of navigating each challenge as it comes, accepting that it may not always be pretty, but knowing that the end goal is still within reach. What cannot be denied is that the upcoming fixtures will demand more, not just in terms of results, but in the manner of performances. The opposition will be stronger, the stakes higher, and the room for error smaller. It is in these moments that teams reveal their true character, where resilience is tested, and where the ability to rise to the occasion becomes the difference between success and disappointment. The current level might keep the team in the race, but it is unlikely to be enough to win it outright without some form of progression. So the focus now shifts to how that progression is achieved, whether through tactical tweaks, personnel changes, or simply a collective step up in intensity and belief. There is still time to shape the outcome of the season, still opportunities to deliver performances that match the expectations that come with wearing the shirt. The question that lingers is whether this group can find that extra gear when it matters most, whether they can turn a run of narrow wins into something more commanding as the ing stretch approaches. Another factor that continues to shape the conversation is the emotional state of the squad during matches, because it is becoming increasingly clear that tension is not just something felt in the stands, but something that seeps onto the pitch as well. When a team is completely confident, you can see it in the way they move the ball, in the speed of their decisions, and in the willingness to take risks in the final third. At the moment, there are spells where Celtic look hesitant, where the safer option is chosen over the more decisive one, and that hesitation allows opponents to stay in games far longer than they should. That is where momentum becomes such a crucial element. In previous periods, when Celtic have been at their best, one goal often quickly turns into 2 or 3, and matches are effectively settled before the opposition has time to react. Right now, that ruthlessness is missing. Even when the breakthrough arrives, it does not always trigger that wave of pressure that overwhelms the other side. Instead, games remain open, and that lingering uncertainty feeds into the anxiety that can be felt around the stadium. There is also a physical aspect to consider, especially as the season moves into its final stretch. Fatigue can play a role, not just physically but mentally as well. Players who have been relied upon heavily may not be operating at their absolute peak, and that can have a knock-on effect across the entire team. Sharpness in pressing, timing in challenges, and accuracy in passing can all dip slightly, and at this level, even small drops can be noticeable. Managing that workload, rotating effectively, and trusting the depth of the squad could become increasingly important in the weeks ahead. At the same time, this is where opportunities emerge for others to step in and make an impact. Fresh legs, different profiles, and new combinations can sometimes inject exactly what is needed to lift a team out of a flat spell. It is not always about making drastic changes, but about finding the right moments to introduce something different, something that catches the opposition off guard and shifts the dynamic of a match. Those decisions, often made on the sidelines, can have a huge influence on how the remainder of the season unfolds. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. The whispers that had been drifting through the East End have gathered into a roar, and though the club has yet to dress it in full ceremony, it now feels all but certain that Celtic have secured the signature of AMAR FATAH. What began as quiet murmurings among supporters and late-night chatter on radio shows has swiftly turned into a story that refuses to be dismissed. Sources close to the situation suggest that negotiations had been moving under the radar for weeks, with the Hoops keen to avoid the usual frenzy that surrounds emerging talents. FATAH, a name that until recently lived mostly in scouting reports and niche discussions, is now being spoken of as a player capable of adding a fresh spark to the squad. There is a growing sense that this is not merely a signing for depth, but one with genuine intent behind it. Around Parkhead, anticipation carries a familiar energy. Supporters have seen this pattern before, a relatively unknown arrival stepping into the Glasgow spotlight and, in time, becoming something much larger. Yet there remains an air of intrigue about FATAH. What exactly will he bring? Flair? Steel? A touch of unpredictability? Those who claim to have watched him closely speak of composure beyond his years and a confidence that does not shrink under pressure. Inside the club, the move is believed to align with a broader vision, one that balances immediate ambition with longer-term planning. If the rumors hold true, FATAH fits neatly into that blueprint. Young, driven, and with room still to grow into the demands of Scottish football. For now, the green half of Glasgow waits, caught between confirmation and curiosity. The deal may be as good as done, but the real story, what AMAR FATAH becomes in the hoops, is only just beginning. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.